In 2012, physicists working at CERN's Large Hadron Collider near Geneva, Switzerland, announced the discovery of the Higgs Boson, often referred to as the so-called God particle. Why it carries that name is something we'll explore more deeply later, but here's the basic idea. This particle interacts with every aspect of reality. In fact, we are continuously immersed in a field of such invisible particles, and it is through this interaction that matter acquires mass. They act like a kind of cosmic resistance, a subtle drag across the universe, spread seamlessly through space. That is why the nickname God particle emerged. But is it really accurate to think of God in such a way? Does God simply diffuse into the structure of the cosmos? Is the universe itself God's body? These questions, shaped by modern spiritual trends, are becoming increasingly common in today's culture. Since our channel Quantum Aligned often discusses the nature of spirit and existence, it's important that we pause here and examine this idea with clarity. This view is traditionally known as Pantheism. According to Webster's dictionary, Pantheism is the belief that God is identical with the forces and laws of the universe. The word itself comes from the Greek pan, meaning all, and theos, meaning God. In Pantheism, there is no distinction between the divine and creation. God is seen as the world itself, and the world is God. All is God, and God is all. People who hold this belief say that God permeates every particle, contains every form, connects to everything, and is found within all that exists. Nothing, they argue, stand apart from God. Such ideas are often found in certain Eastern philosophies and in strands of modern New Age thinking that are gaining popularity in the West. But we must be careful. This is not an accurate understanding of the divine. The truth is that while God is present in every moment and sustains all of existence, what we describe as omnipresence, that does not mean each point in space-time is God. The Creator is not identical with the created. The universe is not God's body, nor an extension of His essence. Rather, the universe is a deliberate creation, entirely dependent upon Him, but distinct from Him. So if the universe is not God, what exactly is it made of? We often think of space-time as the bedrock of reality. But science reveals something more profound. Space, matter, energy, and even the tiniest particles emerge from a deeper foundation. As physicist Brian Greene points out, beneath molecules, beneath atoms, beneath the smallest particles, lies another layer of reality, one woven from information. Here's where things get fascinating. Information, by its very nature, suggests intention, order, and mind. Some might wonder, well, maybe this informational layer is God, or at least part of God? Yet that conclusion doesn't hold. Information points us to design, but it does not equal the designer. In this video from Quantum Aligned, we want to show why God and the universe cannot be equated, no matter how deeply science probes. To explore this, we must dive deeper into matter itself. Atoms, once thought indivisible, are not the smallest units. In the 1960s, scientists discovered that protons and neutrons at the heart of atoms are made of even smaller entities called quarks. To glimpse them, you would need to shrink to scales of 10 to the minus 18 centimeters. To put this in perspective, if an electron were the length of a centimeter, a quark would be comparable to the thickness of a single strand of hair. So far, nothing smaller than quarks has been observed. But theoretical physics did not stop there. This is where string theory enters. You may have heard of it, the idea that quarks and other subatomic building blocks are not solid points, but tiny vibrating strands of energy. If we could magnify them enough, what we would see is not a dot, but a string in motion. These strings are unimaginably small, around 10 to the minus 33 centimeters, about 100 billion times smaller than an atomic nucleus. According to string theory, every property of elementary particles, mass, spin, charge, arises from the frequency at which these strings vibrate. In other words, the diversity of the material world comes from variations of one underlying design. But can we cut these strings into something smaller still? Is there a limit to how far matter can be divided? Physicist Brian Greene offered two possible answers. 1. Strings are truly fundamental, indivisible units, the end of the line, just as the ancients once imagined indivisible atoms. In this sense, strings would be the ultimate building blocks, smallest scale at which matter can exist. Just as letters are the smallest units of language, strings would be the smallest units of matter. Yet some scientists wonder if strings themselves are not final, but another step in the unfolding mystery. And that's where our journey continues. If you're enjoying this exploration so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Quantum Aligned, so together we can keep uncovering the profound link between science, consciousness, and the divine design underlying reality. There is a possibility that even the strings themselves are not the ultimate foundation of matter, but are instead composed of something smaller, or perhaps they arise from a principle far more fundamental than we can currently imagine. By the 1990s, physicists began to realize that string theory was pointing to a reality richer than mere one-dimensional filaments. The mathematics unveiled entire landscapes of multidimensional membranes, objects known as brains. These brains extend in multiple directions. One-dimensional brains resemble strings, but there are also two-dimensional sheets, three-dimensional volumes, and beyond, stretching in principle all the way up to 10 spatial dimensions. When time is added to this structure, we arrive at an 11-dimensional universe, often described by theorists as the Matrix. According to this line of thought, at the smallest conceivable scales, the very fabric of space-time, what we encounter is not emptiness, but a living, dynamic membrane vibrating with activity. This framework is known as M-theory. The M itself has no single agreed definition. Some call it matrix, others mother, and still others leave it open-ended. But what most versions agree upon is striking. Our universe might be a vast membrane suspended within a higher dimensional reality, just one among an endless number of parallel universes, the multiverse. What makes this possibility extraordinary is that these parallel universes may not be unimaginably far away. In fact, they could exist less than a millimeter beyond our reach. Yet no matter how close they are, we cannot simply extend our hand to touch them, because everything we know, including light itself, is bound to our own membrane. M-theory further proposes that all the fundamental particles we observe in our universe, electrons, photons, quarks, are merely the endpoints of strings that stretch invisibly into those higher dimensions. What we perceive in our three-dimensional world may only be a faint shadow of something far greater that exists across dimensions we cannot directly perceive. This naturally raises profound questions. What exactly is vibrating across those hidden dimensions? If the endpoints we observe are electrons and photons, then what is the complete form that exists beyond our view? If we could somehow unfold all of reality and reveal the full scope of these vibrating entities, what would they look like? Could this ultimate source of vibration be identified with God? The answer, from a careful perspective, must be no. For while these discoveries evoke awe and stretch the imagination, equating them directly with the divine risks confusing the creation with the creator. At Quantum Aligned, we emphasize this crucial distinction. The order and intelligence woven into the smallest fibers of existence point to a transcendent mind, but they are not themselves that mind. As we dive deeper into the atom, analyzing the ingredients that form the building blocks of reality, it becomes increasingly evident that intelligence is not an accident hidden in chaos. It is embedded by design. The more we shrink into the quantum depths, the more aware the universe seems to become. One of the most astonishing phenomena to arise from this exploration is known as the observer effect. Elementary particles appear to respond as though they are aware of being watched, as though some program has been written into them that allows them to know when they are under observation. The most famous demonstration of this is the double-slit experiment. When physicists fire electrons at a barrier with two slits, they expect to see two lines on the screen behind it, similar to the way marbles or BBs would behave if tossed through two narrow openings. But subatomic particles defy this expectation. Instead of forming two lines, they generate an interference pattern, multiple bands, indicating that each electron passes through both slits at once, behaving as a wave rather than a discrete particle. This behavior can be explained by wave interference. When a wave strikes the two slits, it divides, producing two waves that overlap. At points where the crest of one wave meets the trough of another, they cancel out, creating dark regions on the screen. Where two crests meet, they amplify each other, creating bright marks. What stunned scientists was the implication. An individual particle seems to exist as a wave of probability, moving through both paths simultaneously. But when researchers attempted to observe the process directly, placing a measuring device at the slits, the wave collapsed. Instead of a spread-out interference pattern, the electrons appeared as individual point-like particles. It was as though the act of conscious observation itself forced the particle to choose a definite state. Brian Greene summarized it this way: particle properties come into being when measurements force them to. When they are not being observed, or when they are not interacting with the environment, particle properties have a nebulous, fuzzy existence, defined only by probabilities. This realization pushes the boundaries of what we consider reality. The subatomic world does not simply exist in neat, fixed arrangements. Instead, its nature is fluid, probabilistic, and strangely responsive to awareness. Another striking feature of the quantum realm is wave-particle duality. We often imagine electrons and protons as tiny billiard balls, solid and localized. Yet experiments force us to accept that these particles are also waves, extending across space like ripples on a cosmic ocean. Only when their properties, such as spin, charge, or mass, are measured do they become localized as particles in the way we normally imagine them. Again, Greene put it powerfully: the success of quantum mechanics compels us to accept that the electron, a basic constituent of matter that we envision as confined to a tiny point, also has a description as a wave that is spread across the entire universe. This is staggering. It means that the very essence of matter is not fixed and isolated, but expansive, distributed, and interconnected at a level far deeper than our senses can perceive. These quantum waves stretch throughout the universe, beyond the reach of our current scientific tools. Such revelations challenge our materialistic assumptions and whisper of a greater intelligence at work, a mind that holds all probabilities and weaves them into a cosmos of order. What modern physics reveals in its strangest, most counterintuitive experiments is not chaos, but harmony concealed within mystery. And that harmony continually reminds us that reality is not random, but aligned with a deeper source. At Quantum Aligned, we interpret these findings not as evidence that the universe is God, but as profound hints that the universe is the creation of God. A creation brimming with elegance, purpose, and intelligibility, designed to awaken us to truths beyond matter. The mysterious quantum waves that underlie matter present one of the deepest puzzles of modern physics. They cannot be observed directly. Whenever scientists attempt to look at them, the waves collapse and reveal themselves only as particles. It is as though the act of observation forces the hidden dimension of reality to disguise itself, refusing to be studied in its purest state. The natural question follows: what exactly is it that is waving? Physicists do not yet know. They only know that whatever is oscillating at this fundamental level is not made of the same ingredients as particles. In fact, in a process that borders on miraculous, particles emerge out of this unseen waving field, manifesting with entirely new properties only at the moment of observation. Over the years, researchers have used different terms to describe this enigmatic foundation: the field of intelligence, the universal field, the mind field, or the superstring field. But perhaps the most meaningful way to describe it is as a field of spiritual information, a substratum of reality from which everything physical emerges. At Quantum Aligned, we describe this as the deepest code of the cosmos, a matrix of divine information that sustains existence. To understand this, it helps to clarify what field means in physics. A field is not a patch of land, but a region of space influenced by forces. It is like an invisible mist of subtle particles that exert influence on anything entering that region. For example, a magnetic field reaches across space, creating attraction or repulsion even at a distance. When you bring a magnet near a refrigerator, you feel the invisible pull. That sensation is caused by virtual photons, particles that mediate the electromagnetic force streaming around a magnet. Any particle carrying charge generates a field around itself, and the particles that transmit these forces are called gauge bosons. They appear and vanish in the quantum void, carrying discrete packets of energy and creating force fields that bind, repel, or attract. For instance, photons are the gauge bosons of electromagnetism, while hypothetical gravitons would carry the force of gravity. Inside atomic nuclei, mesons mediate the strong nuclear force, binding protons and neutrons together. Among all these known fields, the most fundamental is the Higgs field. This field gives mass to particles, shaping the very fabric of matter. It is omnipresent, filling every corner of space-time, impossible to turn off or remove. Its density is staggering. Scientists estimate that within a cubic centimeter of empty space, equivalent in volume to a single die, there lies energy equivalent to 1 trillion tons. No wonder the particle associated with it, the Higgs boson, has been nicknamed the God particle. But we must be careful here. The Higgs field is not itself divine. God is not diffused throughout the cosmos in the way Pantheism suggests. The Higgs field is part of creation, not the creator. God existed before space, time, and energy, and remains distinct from them. The Higgs boson, therefore, is not the final foundation. Instead, it emerges from an even more profound level, which we might call the spirit field. Imagine a quantum ocean filled with countless subtle elements. Let us call them spirit bosons. Unlike conventional gauge bosons, these do not simply carry forces like attraction or repulsion. Instead, they serve as the medium through which all quantum properties, spin, charge, mass, are generated. From this spirit field, the very characteristics of subatomic particles arise. Where does this deeper field originate? At Quantum Aligned, we describe it as the overflow of divine intention. God, who is spirit, established reality through an act of will. Yet this does not mean the universe itself is God. Just as human beings have spirits but are not God, and just as angels may be called spiritual yet remain creatures, so too the universe has a spirit-like foundation without being divine. This spirit field functions as a cosmic sea of information, a quantum ocean carrying the codes of reality. From it, every property of energy and matter emerges. The vibrations of strings, the charges of particles, the spin of electrons, the mass of protons, and the fabric of space-time itself. Everything we perceive in the physical world is downstream from this informational current. In this sense, creation is not random, but informed. Matter does not arise from nothing, but from a matrix of structured information infused into existence. The laws of physics, the constants of nature, and the intricate balance of forces are not accidents. They are the expression of intelligence embedded at the foundation of the cosmos. The spirit field, then, may be understood as the arena in which divine thought crystallizes into physical reality. Each particle, each wave, each vibration is a note in a symphony composed by a transcendent mind. The information carried in this field sustains reality moment by moment. Without it, nothing could exist, not even the laws that make existence possible. At Channel Quantum Aligned, we see this as a profound alignment between modern physics and timeless truth. the recognition that everything emerges from an invisible but intelligible field. Science describes it in the language of waves, bosons, and quantum fields. Faith perceives it as the breath of divine wisdom underlying all things. Together, they point to the same conclusion, that reality is not merely mechanical, but purposeful, intelligent, and alive with meaning. When we reflect on the spirit field, we are reminded that the universe is more than particles and forces. It is a living system of information, woven together with precision and intention. And this recognition invites us to see ourselves not as accidents of matter, but as beings aligned with the deepest currents of creation. The Greek term used for word here is rhema, which refers to what is spoken by a living voice, a sound, a command, or a declaration. It is crucial to understand that when God speaks, it is unlike human speech. Because of his infinite power and authority over creation, his words release spiritual information that can actively operate within our reality. Whether creating particles, healing the blind, raising the dead, or even cursing a fig tree, his words have profound effects at the quantum level because they are saturated with spirit energy, pure spiritual information. Consider the words of Jesus as recorded in John 6 verse 63. The words that I speak to you are spirit, and they are life. This teaches that God's speech does more than move air molecules to produce sound. His words carry spiritual power that can shape the very subatomic properties necessary to form matter. Information flows directly from God's mind into the atoms and molecules of creation. In the Psalms, it is said, "By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and their starry host by the breath of his mouth." Here, the Hebrew word for breath is ruach, meaning wind, breath, or spirit. This demonstrates that God released divine energy filled with information at the origin of the universe. To visualize this, think of a towering oak tree that begins as a tiny seed. It is hard to imagine that all the complexity of the mature tree was contained in that minute seed. The information for the tree's structure is immaterial, encoded in the DNA, which serves as the blueprint from which every atom emerges to form the tree over time. Similarly, our universe began as a singularity, smaller than an electron. This singularity was like a seed, packed full of information. When God spoke, "Let there be universe," or however his command was expressed, all the laws of physics, all the structures, and the fundamental properties of matter were contained within that initial word. For billions of years, the universe has been evolving according to that divine blueprint. So what does this teach us? First, God is not the universe. The universe is not composed of parts of God's being. The substance of reality, mass, spin, charge, and the forces of nature such as gravity and electromagnetism is emergent. These properties arise from a field that God created, a field of spiritual information released through his spoken Rhema word billions of years ago. This word sustains and maintains the cosmos continuously. The essential truth is that God is a person, not a mere cosmic force. He's not the Higgs field, nor a gauge boson drifting in space, nor simply light. God is a being with intellect, will, and purpose. He can think, choose, act, speak, and even change his mind. To qualify as a person, a being must possess self-consciousness and self-determination. The God of the Bible fulfills all these criteria. This understanding has profound implications. Because God is a person, he is moral, just, and accountable. Our actions have meaning, and eternal consequences exist. If God were an impersonal force, sin would be meaningless, and justice would be absent. Yet because God is personal, he is the ultimate lawgiver, and we are responsible to him. The encouraging news is that because God is personal, you can know him intimately. You cannot have a relationship with the universe or any part of creation, but you can know the Creator, the one who brought all things into existence. He is your heavenly Father, and he created you for his glory. By following this guidance and seeking him, you can develop a real, living relationship with the source of all creation.